Question 1. From a practical standpoint, when performing lead abatement using chemical paint stripping methods, what is the most critical factor the supervisor must consider to ensure worker safety and regulatory compliance? A. Selecting a stripping chemical that dries quickly to reduce downtime. B. Ensuring workers are rotated frequently to avoid boredom. C. Using only water-based chemicals regardless of substrate type. D. Evaluating the chemical's toxicity and ventilation requirements before use. Answer. Correct answer, D. Evaluating the chemical's toxicity and ventilation requirements before use. Explanation. The key factor in chemical paint stripping is understanding the hazards associated with chemical exposure, particularly those containing methylene chloride or other volatile organic compounds. OSHA 29 CFR 1926.62 and the OPI rule emphasize evaluating both the chemical's SDS safety data sheet and ensuring adequate mechanical or natural ventilation to protect worker health. Supervisors must also ensure that PPE and respiratory protection meet the requirements of the chemical in use. Water-based chemicals may not be effective in all applications, and focusing on speed, like drying, does not address health risks. Question 2. The general consensus is that during abatement, the proper use and maintenance of HEPA vacuums and negative air machines are crucial. What is the most appropriate supervisory action to maintain this equipment's effectiveness? A. Instructing workers to clean filters weekly without inspecting performance. B. Assigning maintenance responsibilities to the building owner. C. Conducting regular equipment inspections and ensuring filter changes follow manufacturer guidelines. D. Operating the units only during cleanup phases. Answer. Correct answer, C. Conducting regular equipment inspections and ensuring filter changes follow manufacturer guidelines. Explanation. Under OSHA and EPA standards, especially the RP rule and 29 CFR 1926.62, abatement supervisors must maintain all engineering controls. HEPA vacuums and negative air machines require filter inspection and maintenance to remain effective. Filter replacement must follow manufacturer specifications to ensure equipment efficiency. Assigning duties to building owners or using the equipment only during cleanup phases neglects proper containment and exposure prevention strategies. Question 3. As demonstrated by a recent HVACR abatement project, Mr. Lopez, a certified supervisor, is finalizing the operation. Which step must Mr. Lopez include in the preparation of the project closeout report to comply with federal regulations? A. Detailed list of subcontractors' home addresses. B. Summaries of personal logs for each worker. C. Clearance test results and confirmation of waste disposal compliance. D. Cost breakdowns for each containment area. Answer. Correct answer, C. Clearance test results and confirmation of waste disposal compliance. Explanation. According to EPA and HUD regulations, closeout reports must include clearance documentation confirming that post-abatement lead dust levels meet regulatory limits as per 40 CFR 745.227E. 8. The report should also verify proper waste disposal per RA standards. While breakdowns and worker information may be tracked internally, they are not regulatory requirements for the closeout report itself. Question 4. To better understand proper containment procedures, is Fields is supervising an interior abatement project involving lead-based paint removal in a multifamily dwelling. What should she prioritize when setting up the containment zone? A. Providing one entrance and one exit, both unlocked at all times. B. Taping containment barriers directly to painted surfaces. C. Using critical barriers and ensuring negative air pressure is maintained. D. Blocking HVAC vents with plastic and turning off ventilation fans only during work hours. Answer. Correct answer, C. Using critical barriers and ensuring negative air pressure is maintained. Explanation. Proper containment is governed by the HUD Lead Safe Housing Rule and their UPI rule. Supervisors must implement critical barriers, sealed floor-to-ceiling sheeting, and ensure negative air pressure to prevent dust migration. Ventilation must be turned off completely to avoid spreading contamination through duct systems. Entry-exit protocols must also be secure and controlled, not simply left unlocked. Question 5. When analyzing compliance with the OSHA leading construction standard, what must A supervisor ensure before assigning workers to a lead exposure task. A. Workers sign a release of liability form. B. Employees attend a short informal toolbox talk. C. A current exposure assessment and air monitoring are conducted. D. Workers are over the age of 21. Answer. Correct answer. C. A current exposure assessment and air monitoring are conducted. Explanation. Per 29 CFR 1926.62, D. Supervisors must conduct initial exposure assessments and ongoing air monitoring to evaluate potential lead exposure levels. This ensures that control measures such as EPE, engineering controls, and training are based on actual risk. Liability waivers and age criteria are substitutes for regulatory compliance. Toolbox talks supplement, not replace, formal hazard communication and exposure control. Question 6. In light of recent developments, a city council adopted stricter rules aligning with OSHA medical surveillance protocols. How should ISTA-Chan, supervising a 6-month abatement project, manage worker health compliance? A. Require medical exams only at the end of the project. B. Implement blood lead testing before, during, and after exposure if levels exceed action thresholds. C. Allow workers to self-report symptoms and avoid formal testing. D. Conduct medical evaluations only if workers miss more than 3 days. Answer. Correct answer B. Implement blood lead testing before, during, and after exposure if levels exceed action thresholds. Explanation. Under 29 CFR 1926.62, J. If worker exposure exceeds the action level, 30 employers must provide medical surveillance, including blood lead monitoring every 2 months and medical exams every year. This must begin before exposure, continue during work, and ensure proper post-exposure. Supervisors must implement and document compliance to avoid violations and protect worker health. Question 7. Among the various supervisory duties, what is the most appropriate approach ISTA or TEAS should take when training a new group of abatement workers for a complex HVAC project in a hospital? A. Provide hands-on training, mock setups, and site-specific hazards before assigning tasks. B. Allow experienced workers to informally coach the new hires. C. Rely on EPA pamphlets and videos only. D. Post instructions at the work site and let workers refer as needed. Answer. Correct answer. A. Provide hands-on training, mock setups, and site-specific hazards before assigning tasks. Explanation. Supervisors must ensure abatement workers are adequately trained under the ORP rule and OSHA 1926.62. Training must be interactive and tailored to project specific hazards, particularly in sensitive environments like hospitals. Hands-on demonstrations and mock exercises prepare workers to emergencies, identify hazards, and operate specialized equipment. Passive instruction methods like pamphlets or posted instructions are insufficient for compliance. Question 8. The underlying principle of encapsulation is long-term containment. What factors should guide a supervisor's decision to use encapsulation versus enclosure? A. The project timeline is less than 2 weeks. B. The surface condition and adhesion compatibility of the encapsulant. C. The building is over 100 years old. D. There is lack of access to waste disposal sites. Answer. Correct answer B. The surface condition and adhesion compatibility of the encapsulant. Explanation. According to HUD guidelines and ASTME, encapsulation is only appropriate when the surface is stable and compatible with the encapsulant material. Poor adhesion can lead to failure and recontamination. Project duration, age of structure, or disposal logistics do not override the fundamental need for substrate integrity. Supervisors must assess document compatibility before choosing this method. Question 9. While examining a recent enforcement case, it was found that a supervisor failed to report a safety protocol breach. What is the best action a lead abatement supervisor should take when a worker is found violating containment procedures? A. Ignore the behavior if the project is nearly finished. B. Issue a verbal warning only if it's repeated. C. Immediately stop work, correct the issue, and document the violation and corrective actions. D. Let the general contractor handle the incident. Answer. Correct answer. C. Immediately stop work, correct the issue, and document the violation and corrective actions. Explanation. Supervisors are legally obligated to ensure compliance with EPA, OSHA, and HUD rules. Violations of safety protocols can lead to enforcement action. Immediate correction, documentation, and implementation of corrective actions are essential to meet requirements under 40 CFR 745 and OSHA 926.62. Passing responsibility to others or delaying response can result in significant legal and health consequences. Question 10. Considering the evidence, which method is most appropriate when using non-destructive testing to evaluate lead-based paint hazards in HVAC ducts? A. Scratch tests followed by cleaning the area with soap. B. Flame testing to identify lead content. C. SRF analyzers calibrated for metal surfaces. D. Manual scraping of ducts to reveal underlying layers. Answer. Correct answer. CSRF analyzers calibrated for metal surfaces. Explanation. Non-destructive testing in HVAC systems should use properly calibrated X-ray fluorescence SRF analyzers that can measure lead presence on metallic surfaces. These tools are effective, EPA-recognized, and reduce the risk of contamination. Flame testing and scraping are destructive, unsafe, and non-compliant with HUD and EPA standards. Scratch tests are unsigned and offer unreliable results. Question 11. Through careful analysis of a lead abatement site in a commercial building, ISTQI must assess whether HVAC systems pose a lead hazard. Which strategy should he employ first to accurately evaluate potential risks? A. Assume no hazard exists unless dust is visibly present. B. Immediately begin duct removal. C. Conduct surface and dust wipe sampling in HVAC registers and plenums. D. Use only visual inspection methods for initial clearance. Answer. Correct answer. C. Conduct surface and dust wipe sampling in HVAC registers and plenums. Explanation. EPA and HUD protocols recommend dust wipe sampling in critical HVAC components such as registers, plenums, and duct linings to identify lead dust hazards. Visual inspection alone cannot detect invisible contaminants. Sampling aligns with 40 CFR 745.227 and ASTME. Supervisors must not assume safety based on appearance or skip evaluation steps. Immediate removal without risk assessment is non-compliant. Question 12. When faced with HVAC systems contaminated by lead dust, what should Istadine Julo prioritize when cleaning and decontaminating ductwork in a school abatement project? A. Use compressed air to blow out dust. B. Flush the ducts with water. C. Utilize HEPA-filtered vacuum systems followed by wet wiping. D. Remove only the visible debris and reseal ducts. Answer. Correct answer. C. Utilized HEPA-filtered vacuum systems followed by wet wiping. Explanation. Cleaning lead-contaminated HVAC ducts requires methods that prevent dust aerosolization and spread. The ORP rule and NIOSH recommend HEPA vacuuming combined with wet cleaning to capture residual particulates. Using compressed air or water flushing disperses contaminants and violates safety standards. Only removing visible debris does not meet clearance requirements. Question 13. In summary of his responsibilities, Mr. O'Neill discovers that abatement workers repeatedly failed to wear required PPE. What should he do as part of corrective action plan? A. Increase work quotas to discourage PPE removal. B. Document the violations, retrain workers, and update enforcement protocols. C. Ignore the issue since no one has reported symptoms. D. Send only the foreman to additional training. Answer. Correct answer. B. Document the violations, retrain workers, and update enforcement protocols. Explanation. A supervisor must develop and implement a documented corrective action plan when violations occur. Under 20 IN CFR 1926.62 and OP guidelines, this includes retraining, revising procedures, and holding safety briefings. Ignoring safety failures or placing responsibility on one individual is non-compliant and endangers workers. Question 14. Examining the consequences of improper cleanup during a lead abatement project, what step must ISVAUGHN take to ensure compliance during final decontamination? A. Clean surfaces only once using dry rags. B. Use HEPA vacuums and perform a 3-stage wet wipe cleaning. C. Allow natural settling of airborne particles before clearing the site. D. Skip cleaning in non-visible areas like behind radiators. Answer. Correct answer. B. Use HEPA vacuums and perform a 3-stage wet wipe cleaning. Explanation. According to HUD guidelines and the ARI rule, cleanup must be thorough and systematic. The best practice involves HEPA vacuuming followed by a 3-step wet wipe process: detergent wash, rinse, and second rinse. This method ensures dust removal from visible and hidden surfaces. Skipping steps or using dry cleaning is unacceptable. Question 15. In the modern context of evidence chain management, what is required when Mr. Alvarez completes sampling during a lead investigation? A. Only day and time of sampling are needed. B. Chain of custody forms must document sample transfers and signatures. C. Forms are optional if samples are tested within 24 hours. D. Notes can be written casually in the project journal. Answer. Correct answer. B. Chain of custody forms must document sample transfers and signatures. Explanation. Accurate sample tracking is critical for regulatory and legal purposes. Chain of custody forms are mandated under LAP, National Lead Laboratory Accreditation Program, protocols and EPA rules. They document sample origin, handling, transfer, and authentication. Without proper forms, results can be challenged and deemed invalid. Question 16. Looking at the data on leaded window frames, Mr. Sanderson decides to remove rather than stabilize them. What is the most important factor in deciding to proceed with component removal? A. The component's historical value. B. Whether stabilization is too labor-intensive. C. The condition and accessibility of the component for safe removal. D. Worker availability for the week. Answer. Correct answer. C. The condition and accessibility of the component for safe removal. Explanation. According to HUD and EPA guidelines, deteriorated and inaccessible components with lead-based paint should be removed if they cannot be stabilized safely. Supervisors must evaluate structural integrity, dust generation risk, and worker safety. Factors like labor intensity or worker availability are not regulatory considerations. Question 17. With the advent of stricter housing rules, what is required under the HUD Lead Safe Housing Rule when conducting lead abatement in federally assisted properties? A. Clearance testing is optional in rental units. B. Only notification to tenants is required. C. Visual assessment and clearance testing must be conducted by a certified risk assessor or inspector. D. Contractors may self-certify the property. Answer. Correct answer. C. Visual assessment and clearance testing must be conducted by a certified risk assessor or inspector. Explanation. Under 24 CFR Part 35, HUD Lead Safe Housing Rule, federally assisted properties undergoing abatement must be inspected and cleared by a certified risk assessor or lead inspector. Clearance ensures dust levels are below federal thresholds. Self-certification and tenant-only notifications meet federal requirements. Question 18. The effectiveness of abatement depends partly on the functioning of equipment. If a negative air machine fails during work, what is the supervisor's best course of action? A. Ignore the failure if work is nearly complete. B. Immediately halt work, repair or replace the machine and re-establish containment. C. Ventilate the room with open windows. D. Use household vacuum to supplement airflow. Answer. Correct answer. B. Immediately halt work, repair or replace the machine and re-establish containment. Explanation. Equipment like negative air machines is critical to maintaining pressure differentials and preventing lead dust migration. OSHA and EPA rules require work to cease when critical containment systems fail. Using household vacuums or opening windows compromises safety and violates containment integrity. Question 19. Despite the fact that digital records are common, what is the most compliant way for ISBECA to maintain lead abatement documentation over the long term? A. Keep only electronic copies on personal devices. B. Maintain detailed written and electronic logs accessible to regulators for at least 3 years. C. Shred all reports after project completion. D. Store documents in unsecured filing cabinets at the job site. Answer. Correct answer. B. Maintain detailed written and electronic logs accessible to regulators for at least 3 years. Explanation. EPA and OSHA regulations 40 CFR 26.227 and 29 CFR 1926.62 require abatement records, including training logs, clearance results, and exposure data, to be retained for at least 3 years. Records must be retrievable and available upon inspection. Personal storage or destruction of records violates compliance requirements. Question 20. In what ways can a lead abatement supervisor address an unexpected lead hazard found behind wall paneling during renovation? A. Continue work and report the finding at project close. B. Pause work, reassess the abatement plan, and document the change. C. Skip the area and notify the contractor later. D. Ignore it if it's not part of the original scope. Answer. Correct answer. B. Pause work, reassess the abatement plan, and document the change. Explanation. According to ARP and HUD guidelines, discovery of unexpected hazards requires immediate reassessment. Supervisors must revise the site-specific abatement plan and document all deviations. Proceeding without reevaluation may violate containment and exposure protocols and could result in regulatory penalties or health risks. Question 21. The core principles of troubleshooting equipment malfunctions were tested when Simmons observed a sudden loss of suction on a HEPA vacuum during an abatement project. What is the first step she should take to resolve this issue? A. Continue work and plan to repair the vacuum after the shift. B. Shut down the equipment and inspect the filter and hoses for clogs or damage. C. Switch to a standard vacuum cleaner to maintain workflow. D. Inform the building occupants to avoid the area. Answer. Correct answer. B. Shut down the equipment and inspect the filter and hoses for clogs or damage. Explanation. Supervisors must ensure the HEPA equipment functions properly during lead abatement to prevent dust release. Immediate shutdown and inspection prevent further contamination and ensure safety. Continuing work with malfunctioning equipment violates OSHA 1926.62 and RP requirements. Standard vacuums do not. HEPA filtration and are prohibited. Informing occupants is important but secondary to fixing the issue. Question 22. With the advent of stricter regulations, Mr. Patel is tasked with maintaining accurate records during a lead abatement project. Which of the following best describes compliant record-keeping practices? A. Records should be kept on site for 6 months and then discarded. B. Only clearance test results need to be documented. C. All project documentation, including worker training, exposure data, and clearance results, must be securely maintained for at least 3 years. D. Verbal reports from workers can substitute written documentation. Answer. Correct answer. C. All project documentation, including worker training, exposure data, and clearance results, must be securely maintained for at least 3 years. Explanation. Under EPA 40 CFR 745.227 and OSHA 1926.62, records such as training certifications, exposure monitoring, medical surveillance, and clearance testing must be retained for at least 3 years and made available upon request. Discarding records early or relying on verbal reports violates compliance and can result in penalties. Question 23. From the perspective of sampling integrity, what is the primary reason for following strict chain of custody procedures during lead dust sample collection? A. To ensure sample labels look professional. B. To prevent sample contamination and preserve legal defensibility of results. C. To speed up the laboratory analysis process. D. To reduce paperwork for the supervisor. Answer. Correct answer. B. To prevent sample contamination and preserve legal defensibility of results. Explanation. Chain of custody documentation prevents tampering and contamination of samples, ensuring that test results are valid and legally defensible as required by EPA and HUD regulations. Proper labeling and tracking protect the integrity of the sampling process. Aesthetic or administrative reasons are secondary. Question 24. In a modern context of lead abatement, when replacing HVAC components contaminated with lead paint, which approach aligns best with regulatory standards? A. Removing components without containment to reduce costs. B. Encapsulating the entire HVAC system instead of removal. C. Using wet methods and containment to minimize dust spread during removal. D. Replacing components only during regular maintenance schedules. Answer. Correct answer. C. Using wet methods and containment to minimize dust spread during removal. Explanation. The LP rule and OSHA require supervisors to implement dust control methods such as wetting and containment during removal of lead-painted components to reduce airborne hazards. Removing without containment or waiting for maintenance periods ignores safety protocols and increases exposure risks. Encapsulation is sometimes appropriate, but often not sufficient for HVAC component removal. Question 25. Given the circumstances, Lee encounters a project where unexpected lead hazards were discovered behind wall paneling. What is the best course of action according to EPA and HUD guidelines? A. Continue with the original abatement plan and report changes after project completion. B. Stop work, update the abatement plan to include the new hazard, notify stakeholders and document changes. C. Remove only the accessible hazards and ignore the hidden ones. D. Delegate the decision to the building owner. Answer. Correct answer. B. Stop work, update the abatement plan to include the new hazard, notify stakeholders and document changes. Explanation. EPA and HUD require that any newly discovered lead hazards be immediately addressed by revising abatement plans, communicating with owners and occupants, and documenting all changes. Continuing work without revision risks non-compliance and health hazards. Ignoring or delegating the issue is negligent. Question 26. The relationship between proper PPE selection and respiratory protection programs is crucial. What is the most critical reason that a supervisor must integrate both in a lead abatement project? A. To ensure workers have the latest gear regardless of hazards. B. To comply with OSHA 1926.62, which requires respiratory protection matched to exposure levels. C. To avoid purchasing disposable gear frequently. D. To impress regulatory inspectors during audits. Answer. Correct answer. B. To comply with OSHA 1926.62, which requires respiratory protection matched to exposure levels. Explanation. OSHA mandates that respiratory protection programs be tailored to measured exposure levels, including fit testing, maintenance, and training. PPE selection must complement these requirements to reduce inhalation of lead dust and fumes effectively. Cost or appearance is irrelevant. Regulatory compliance and worker safety. Question 27. A key distinction between cleanup and decontamination procedures lies in their goals. Which statement best describes this distinction? A. Cleanup removes visible debris. Decontamination removes hazardous residues and lead dust. B. Both processes are interchangeable terms. C. Cleanup only involves vacuuming, while decontamination involves repainting. D. Decontamination can be skipped if the site looks clean. Answer. Correct answer. A. Cleanup removes visible debris. Decontamination removes hazardous residues and lead dust. Explanation. Cleanup typically involves removal of construction debris and dust, while decontamination is a more rigorous process designed to eliminate residual lead contamination to levels safe for reoccupancy. EPA and HUD guidelines specify multiple steps and verification to ensure decontamination is successful. Skipping or confusing these steps risks ongoing exposure. Question 20. At the heart of this issue, Mr. Anderson must ensure that HVACR ductwork is properly cleaned post-abatement. Which verification method best demonstrates compliance with lead dust clearance? A. Visual inspection alone. B. Collection and laboratory analysis of dust wipe samples from duct surfaces. C. Measuring airflow velocity in ducts. D. Asking workers if ducts look clean. Answer. Correct answer. B. Collection and laboratory analysis of dust wipe samples from duct surfaces. Explanation. Clearance testing using dust wipe samples analyzed in EPA-recognized laboratories provides objective data confirming lead dust levels are below regulatory thresholds. Visual inspection is insufficient as lead dust is often microscopic and invisible. Airflow velocity is unrelated to lead dust levels. Question 29. Considering the evidence, which supervisory action best addresses non-compliance when the worker repeatedly removes PPE during lead removal activities? A. Allow it if the worker feels comfortable. B. Enforce immediate cessation of work, retrain the worker, and document the incident as per OSHA standards. C. Ignore minor infractions to maintain morale. D. Delay action until the next scheduled safety meeting. Answer. Correct answer. B. Enforce immediate cessation of work, retrain the worker, and document the incident as per OSHA standards. Explanation. OSHA 1926.62 requires supervisors to enforce PPE use strictly as removal can cause serious exposure. Immediate corrective action protects workers and ensures regulatory compliance. Delaying or ignoring non-compliance risks health hazards and legal penalties. Question 30. In light of recent developments, Mr. Gomez needs to prepare a project closeout report. Which element is absolutely essential for regulatory acceptance? A. Photographs of the work site only. B. Detailed records of training, exposure monitoring, PPE use and clearance testing results. C. A financial summary of project costs. D. A list of all workers' personal addresses. Answer. Correct answer. B. Detailed records of training, exposure monitoring, PPE use, and clearance testing results. Explanation. Regulatory agencies require comprehensive documentation proving all aspects of the abatement were compliant with EPA and OSHA standards. This includes training logs, exposure monitoring, DARE, PPE records, and clearance test reports. Financial or personal information is not relevant to regulatory acceptance.